Welcome to another episode of Coda Conversations. Today we have composer Andre Fratto. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks
Yes.
for coming on, man. Thanks for
Yeah,
coming on.
cool.
Just to get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Can you give us your background, what you do, and how you ended up in the position you're in now?
Yeah, sure. I live in New York. I've been working as a professional composer for God, I guess a bit over 20 years now. What year is it? A bit over 20 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I've been. I'm originally I'm from upstate New York, Finger Lakes region, what we call Western New York, and I moved here in I guess early 90s, 91, 92. I have I have no idea what day it is. So, um,
Yeah,
it,
that's awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Um, so, but I'm, yeah. So I moved to New York in the early 90s, actually to act. I went to acting school and had never really dreamed of doing music professionally. I had been in a rock band back in my hometown, just kind of playing frat parties and playing, you know, uh, classic rock covers, and then I had done some theater, and then moved to New York and got in a band here. And after a year or two of acting school, I kind of thought, I'm a music guy.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I did the band thing, and then eventually started getting into production, and then getting into composing for film and TV, and then composing
That's
kind of,
amazing.
yeah. And I mean, it's been a long, a long haul. Um, but yeah, and then and that's what I'm doing now. Just, yeah.
So, for our listeners, can you explain how exactly you got into music composition?
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, it goes back to childhood. When I was a kid, my dad was a huge classical and opera fan,
Oh
and
wow.
and every Sunday morning we would listen to a new piece. His idea of kind of a father-son baseball game was taking me to the
Right.
orchestra, you know.
Yeah.
So I grew up with it. I grew up loving it, and he always kind of charged me with picking the record for music. And I would pick Vivaldi one night and Mozart the next night and Sinatra the next night.
Yeah.
And my family, I come from an Italian and Spanish family, so it was kind of, I think, just part of the culture a bit. And But yeah, so I again, I never really thought of doing music. It wasn't until I was in my teenage years that I saw my brother play in a band and heard Pink Floyd for the first time, and I was like, "Ooh, that's what I want
Ooh,
to do."
nice. Nick
Um,
Mason. Yeah, he's one of
yeah.
my favorite drummers, Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah, he's great. And Gilmore, my God, I mean, that man sings
David
on that
Gilmour,
instrument. Yeah,
amazing.
favorite
And the
guitar.
original singer was great too, Sid Barrett,
Sid, yeah, the tragic poet.
the guy who went nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And But yeah, so I guess that's those were the kind of seeds that were planted. And then flash forward, whatever, 15 years, when I was in a rock band, I just didn't love how that was going. I got tired of kind of 3.5 minute songs and expressing one idea. And
Right.
I wanted to kind of get into, what academics call serious music, which is an absurd phrase. But
You mean
yes,
more like classical? You wanted to get more into
yeah, I
classical?
wanted to get into more, to I don't know, more music that would express more than one thing and could dive into greater depths of the human condition. And um,
Right.
it and not approach music as kind of just entertainment, but as art. And they're not always the same thing. And they serve different purposes. Um, so
Absolutely.
so I started kind of breaking away from the band situation, first going solo and getting my first home studio, and starting to arrange my own rock songs. But then infusing other influences into it. And then I started getting into film scoring and music for TV. And then you just have to do whatever music is required of you. It's whatever's asked of you. The director
Correct.
wants whatever, and you got to give them whatever. And you have to. And
Yeah.
if you've never done it before, you got to figure it out. So
Right. So sink or swim kind of industry, right?
yeah, totally. I mean, I was working the first film I ever scored. I still had a day job. I mean, I was 30. I guess I was 30 years old, and I was working at the what's it called? The Screening Room restaurant down on Varick and Canal. And 9/11 had happened, and it was barely hanging on, like barely hanging
Right.
on.
Right.
And it was also an independent film, so it was like a restaurant with an independent film, 2 screening rooms kind of next to it. You could have dinner and then go see a movie, and they would show foreign films. And this guy came in once, and he was having a drink, and we were chatting, and I'd seen him a few times.
Yeah.
And we were starting to chat, and he mentioned that he was just back from Afghanistan and that he had just directed his first documentary film. And I said, "Oh, do you need a composer?" And he said, "Yeah, can you do Afghan music?" And I said, "Sure."
Sure. Yeah.
And he's like, "What do you charge for that?" And I said, "I don't know." And I just thought of the most ridiculous number because I didn't want to lose the job. I was like, $700. He was like, "Sure." So then I started figuring it out. I went to a kebab house down on 9th Avenue to find a couple Afghan guys to ask them, like, "Hey, what's your music sound like?"
Oh, that's great.
And they were really nice and played me a couple things, and then I kind of figured it out. I mean, he didn't really want traditional stuff, it turns out. When it came down to his temp score, I think he used the Peter Gabriel soundtrack to, what was it? The Last Temptation of Christ. Gorgeous.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I love Peter Gabriel, Genesis.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of what got me into the film and TV thing, and it kind of grew over the years from there. And then over the last, I guess, maybe 7 or so years, I've been really diving into kind of big orchestral stuff.
Like, when did it become full time for you, the music?
I think I took the leap. I mean, that restaurant was my last day job, so it wasn't long after 9/11 that they threw in the towel. I don't remember exactly how long, but at that point, I mean, I think I'd gotten myself down to like 2 or 3 days a week, and because I would work a day job as bare minimum as possible. I didn't even care how poor I was, because I knew that if I was making a lot of money in a day job, I would never progress in what I wanted to progress in. So I was willing to never go out, never see my friends, never spend money if that meant I could not have to work in an office somewhere and do music for a living.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
No, it must be very freeing to jump into music like that.
yeah, and terrifying. I mean, I was barely making ends meet. Barely. There was a lot of months I wasn't making ends meet and going into debt, and it was terrifying. And I'm not from a family of means, so there wasn't like some giant support system. Little help from parents here and there, but
there was no one that was going to no one that was going to bail you out. Ultimately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when the screening room closed, I think then it was I made the decision then to try to go full time, to advertise as much as possible as a producer, and to produce indie stuff out of my house, and then
did you get any gigs off of like Craigslist or sites like that?
That's exactly it. I think Craigslist was still relatively new, so it wasn't so kind of scammy as it is now, if I
As it
remember.
is nowadays. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people don't use it anymore.
Yeah, it's and there may have been a couple other sites. I don't remember if the Village Voice was still up and running at that point or if that was online. But yeah, and word of mouth and friends who were in bands and anybody I could get. I mean, I think one of the first
Yeah.
clients was he was like this Christian rapper, this like really funny, goofy, tall, skinny white guy who like decided he was gonna become a Christian rapper. And
Yeah.
I just remember one of his rhymes. One of his rhymes was, "You want to do it Yahweh, but you got to do it Yahweh." And
Oh, what?
yeah, so I was saying. I mean, he was a sweetheart, and I don't need to actually badmouth anyone. I'm sure there's a market for everything, but I was
Sure.
saying yes to everything. I would say yes to everything, and if I didn't know how to do it, I would learn it and figure it out, and sometimes mess it up. But um, yeah, and and eventually, I got pretty decent at productions, and a friend of a friend owned Skyline Studios at the time, one of the larger recording studios in Midtown, and he asked if I would come in and be kind of one of his in-house producers and run his studio B. And
Oh, wow.
so
That's amazing.
that was amazing because I got a friend of mine who was an engineer because I didn't really know much about engineering. I could arrange and I could write and I could come up with parts, but
It's all
you know,
very different. Yeah. Music production, composition, mixing, they're all a little different.
yeah, and I was only working on I think I was working on like one of those early 24 track or even 16 track Roland. What was it called? I forget what it was called, but it was like a hard drive recording system and it gave you like 16 tracks and a bunch of effects, and it was super cool, but it wasn't Pro Tools. It wasn't a
So it wasn't like an SSL or a Neve board.
No, it was all this like built-in unit, all this all in one kind of thing, hard driver and mixer all in one thing,
Got it.
tiny
Got it.
little
So
screen.
older tech,
Yeah,
basically.
older tech. This was early 2000s. Yeah, so this was um so I asked a friend of mine who was an engineer to come into the studio with me as kind of my engineering side, and that we would split any income 50-50. And so I learned a lot from him of engineering. And then the head engineer at
Yeah.
the head engineer at Skyline, Ron Allaire, was one of those kind of audio geniuses, really old school, knew his shit. He had built a SSL compressor into this classic Neve board. So I think it was the only Neve board in the world with an SSL built-in compressor. So
Oh, that's unique.
it was really sick, and it was an amazing learning experience, learning from him. Um, and they had major acts coming in and out of there, like major. It was a major studio. So
Right.
yeah. So when I left there and moved the studio back home, then I was kind of able to operate out of home at a much higher level, and the technology was coming along, with that. So um,
So, like, what do you use nowadays for a DAW? Pro Tools, Logic?
yeah, I Pro Tools primarily. I have Logic, but I I I really dislike Logic.
Yeah, I prefer Pro Tools.
Yeah, I mean, there are things about Logic that are super cool, and I wish Pro Tools would do just a couple things. But overall,
Yeah.
it's a bloated project. I mean, it's a bloated DAW. It tries to be all things at once, and yet ends up kind of being nothing. It also does, I think, the worst thing, which is it assumes that you have no idea what you're doing, so it's going to do it for you,
Right.
and
Right.
and that includes vocal processing and pitch correction and even giving you chords and bass player and all this shit where it's like, dude, learn how to do it. Learn how to do it yourself. And
Right,
I
right.
hear so many projects now that as soon as I hear it, I hear it, it's Logic. I'm like, oh, I can hear the Logic. There it is. There's that
Oh,
keyboard
that's
sound.
funny.
There's that drum loop. There's that thing.
Yeah.
There's that vocal processing that is just like, yeah. So,
So it's too like right out of the box.
yeah, and it's just and it just does too much for you. It doesn't. I think the difference is this. Pro Tools is based on old school engineering. It's basically the idea of you have a board, you've got inputs, and then you've got
Yeah.
what it's being recorded onto, in this case, a hard drive. So it's set up like old school engineering. So if you know engineering, you can operate Pro Tools. Logic is not really set up like that. Logic is set up to be this kind of all-encompassing digital workstation that anything you can't do yourself, it will do better, but not really.
It'll fill in the gaps for you.
Yeah, and it doesn't ask you to really learn anything. It doesn't ask you to get better. Pro Tools doesn't care if you suck. You know, it's up to you to learn how to do it.
Sure.
So I appreciate that. And I think, having said that, Logic is really great for really fast turnaround shit. You know, if you need that
Yeah.
really commercial sound and you have a night to do it, to work on a commercial or some cue for a television show, and you've got to get that shit out there in a day, and you need it to sound like it is really fully produced, it's hard to do that from scratch in Pro Tools without taking the time to do it properly.
Absolutely.
You know, so for commercial quick turnaround stuff, Logic is very handy. I will say. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're doing what? Video game stuff, right?
Yeah, video game composition, like chiptune, 8-bit, 16-bit.
Right. So a lot of that stuff is really, oh, so you're doing some of that old school.
Like retro, nostalgia music.
That's so fun.
It's kind of like the latest album I did. It's called Islands, so it's kind of like a reggae themed synth wave concept album.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that's the most recent one I worked on.
Yeah, you must be fully stocked of soft synths and all. I mean, it's amazing what we can have now in our computer.
So I write everything on the Korg EMX1. It's called the Electribe.
Really? Good for you.
Yes, I write everything on there, and then I go to a mastering studio to get it recorded.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So it's like you're inside this environment, you're inside this whole world of the Electribe, and like you just put on the headphones and you get immersed in this world where you can, make loops and you can move them around in song mode, and you just do, full compositions in there, just totally immersed in the environment of the Electribe.
Wow. So do you love that thing?
Yeah, it's love-hate. It's love-hate because it does have its limitations.
Mm-hmm.
But because of those limitations, you figure out workarounds to get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you primarily work off, like a PC or Mac with Pro Tools setup?
Yeah, I'm on a Mac, and basically, I these days I'm keeping it really simple. I basically, what do I do? I've got my Arturia 88 note keyboard, the what is it? The Keylab 88, which I really love. Going into my claret, my Focusrite. Got a couple.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think right now I've got it plugged in via USB, but because that way I can control some of my soft synths, like the sliders and because it comes with a lot of Arturia software, and a lot of those are classic synths, and it has a ton of drawbars and everything. So you can kind of go into like classic analog mode if you want, if it's connected via USB. I think some of that doesn't translate via MIDI.
Got it.
And then I've got I've got my guitar. I've got a guitar kind of situation here too, a pedal board also going into the Focusrite, and a couple Atom Audio speakers, which are new for me. I got these last year. It's my first Atom Audio speakers, and
Nice.
I just adore them. Oh my God, I love them so much.
Nice.
And I've got a vocal booth here. And in terms of writing, yeah, I mean, you know, sometimes I think, I mean, piano is my primary instrument, so I would say a lot of the writing happens on piano, but I play guitars as well. So when it comes to kind of a certain type of songwriting, I might write that on the guitar.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of composers do base things off of the keyboard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it does seem to be the instrument that can kind of best emulate any other instrument, you know?
Correct.
So you can kind of write a rhythm part, you can write a flute part, and you can almost, if you play it in a certain way, you can almost make that thing sound like a flute. Like it's just such an incredible instrument. So yeah, so that's how I'm kind of coming into the board, and then, you know, using plugins. Right now I'm doing a lot of orchestral stuff because I'm working on my first opera, which is ridiculous, but
Right. You mentioned you're working on an opera and you're in kind of the final stages of it.
yeah, I'm on the last scene. Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's a 3-act.
How did you get into writing an opera?
Oh God, this is such a bad answer. I never dreamt of attempting an opera. It never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I've written a couple symphonies and a concerto and some smaller choral pieces and such. But it never occurred to me. But I'm a huge opera fan. I love opera. I listen to opera the way I listen to Pink Floyd.
Oh, wow.
And you know, again, I grew up with Italian opera, which is romantic and melodic and has a story, and so that's what I want to hear in opera. And I go to the opera relatively often, and occasionally hear contemporary operas and new operas, and I haven't heard a single one that I liked. It's all atonal, esoteric, self-serious, self-absorbed. It's just nothing anybody wants to listen to, and nothing that any singer wants to sing. So I went to a particular opera that I won't mention, but I hated it so much that, and I thought it was so bad, and it was being heralded, and I just thought, somebody's got to do better than this, and no one's doing it. So if this thing can be produced, I know I can. I'm an idiot, and I know I can do better than this. So
Yeah. Right.
so that's what got me going. And then I had to, and then it took a lot of thinking. I had to think about what I wanted it to be, what kind of opera, what story, what kind of music, and I knew that I didn't want it to be in English, because I really don't like when opera is sung in English. It just feels wrong to me.
Right, coming from the Italian background.
Yeah, and also it's just the musicality of the language. English is a great language for rock, blues, jazz, folk music. But when you try to sing it operatically, what that means is you're stretching these vowels to make it sound basically like Italian. You're Italianizing it, and it just sounds weird. It just sounds off and inauthentic. And so I knew I didn't want it to be in English. So I'm a kind of a history nerd, and recently I've been obsessed with the Dark Ages, and I've been reading about King Alfred and his family, and including Queen Ethelfled of Mercia, who was his daughter, who fought off waves of Viking invaders, and she was this amazing warrior queen, but also this kind of wise and just ruler. And so I decided to base it on her. So I wrote an opera about her, and then
Oh, interesting.
I found a guy in England to translate it into Old English for me. So it's being sung in Old English, which is, sounds a little bit like Danish. Like, it doesn't sound anything like contemporary English. It's unrecognizable.
Sure. Yeah, right.
And so that's, yeah. So now I'm on the last scene and trying to land the plane. We'll see if I can pull it off.
That's awesome. And where did you go to school?
Oh, I didn't. I dropped out of high school at 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you're all self-made.
Yeah, no, I was a terrible student and could not. I mean, it was so hard to get past the C for me. I mean, I could not do anything in school. I was utterly useless to myself and to anyone else. And at 16,
yeah, personally, I did terrible on the SATs.
You did? Oh, I never even took them. I can't even imagine. I would get like 3. I would get, yeah.
Yeah, no, I bombed. Yeah, I got really low scores, and it just, took the wind out of my sails for like going to college. I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Oh, yeah. Where did you go?
So I went to state school, Western Connecticut University in Danbury.
Nice.
I'm from Connecticut.
Oh yeah, I mean I know that area a bit. It's beautiful there.
Yeah, Connecticut's very pretty. Yeah. But yeah, so I went there for 2 years, just taking like general classes, psychology, philosophy, English, math, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really connect with it. And I was doing music at the time on a pretty professional level. I had a band that had toured the US a couple of times. We did Europe, we did Central America.
God, how fun.
So yeah, we were getting pretty well known, but the singer didn't want to give up his apartment and go full time. At the time I was a little younger and just getting out of high school, and I'm like, hey, like, let's take this full time. And the singer's like, no, I want to keep my apartment. He's like, you're too young to realize why I'm not going to give this up. So as I got older, I kind of understood his logic, but ultimately I quit that band because he didn't want to take it all away. Even though we had gone pretty far, he didn't want to push past that and do it full time. So I decided, I was in other bands at the time. I was in this pop rock band that broke up, and then we changed more into like indie rock. So that indie rock group I moved to LA with at age 22.
Oh, wow.
And we broke up within a year, but it got me out there to LA. Yeah. And then I started doing music.
Yeah. Where were you in LA?
Primarily based out of Hancock Park, which I don't know if you know LA. That's like right below Hollywood. Yeah. Very pretty area. Yeah. Lots of families.
Yeah. I have a brother in South Pass and I have a lot of friends out there too, scattered around the area. So.
Oh, nice. Have you been out there?
Yeah, many times. Not recently, and I'm really due a trip. But yeah, but all LA area. I'm really dying to see the rest of the state, especially up north.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow, that's wild. Huh. So when did you move back east?
I've been back here for maybe 5 or 6 years because my family's in New York.
Right.
And my mom is aging, and it's good to be near family. Yeah. And I have an aunt in Rockaway Beach, Queens. I have an aunt and cousin that live over there, so it's nice to be nearby them. I'm in Long Island, out near Riverhead, if you know Long Island at all. So way out in Suffolk.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know it that well. I mean, I've been to what is it, Montauk a few times, which I
Oh
suppose
wow, so all the way out there.
all
Yeah.
the way out. Yeah, just love. God, it's so nice out there. Anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the scoop. That's how I guess hold it all together, or how I got here at least. I don't know how I held it all together.
Right.
Yeah.
Kevin, did you have any questions?
Sure. So you said you didn't do particularly well in school. So how did you avoid like letting that discourage you from pursuing your music dreams?
Oh God, yeah. I A lot of that was, a combination of luck of the draw and just how things kind of unfolded. I mean, luck in the sense that I have really wonderful parents. I mean, my mom died in '97, but uh, she was really something. She was a professor. My dad was also a professor, and it was
Oh
actually,
wow.
yeah, and it was my mom who actually suggested that I drop out. She saw that I wasn't doing well, and most importantly, I wasn't learning anything.
I think
And
some people just they're not cut out for school, and I always felt that way. I always felt like this is not the route for me. I
yeah,
tried to force it on myself,
yeah,
but ultimately it never worked out.
yeah. That's right. I was miserable during those days. I mean, everything in the institution was telling me that I sucked and that I was stupid, and yet I think I knew that wasn't true. I mean, I knew I
Right.
wasn't a genius, but I knew I wasn't. I knew that there was a disconnect there. And so when I dropped out, she had some colleagues who were also professors who invited me to kind of sit in on their classes unofficially, take an independent study in theater without even enrolling in her colleges, just kind of,
Oh wow.
on the down low, so to speak.
That's
Um,
awesome. That's an awesome opportunity.
yeah, so I did a year of that, and that's where I met kind of a new group of friends who were all college students, including the members of the first band that I was in, and played those stupid frat houses. Um, and
Yes.
um, but so I was really lucky in that sense. And then because of theater, I auditioned for this acting school in New York, which brought me to New York, which then led me to meeting, my next band in New York. So I think that it was just kind of how it unfolded. So, and also, honestly, I wasn't going to succeed at anything else. I wasn't gonna. I was
Yeah.
never gonna be a banker. I was never gonna be. I don't know. I can't even
Like
imagine.
a regular profession.
Yeah, I would fail at everything else. Honestly, it's so it's not like there were any options. I mean, God, when I grow up, I'd like to be an archaeologist, but in the meantime, the only thing I can do is music and food, and
Yeah. Well,
that.
that's similar to me because, like, as a kid, I wanted to be an architect, but I couldn't draw. I was terrible at drawing. And
Wow.
then they also said, oh, you need to know a lot of math to be
Yeah,
an architect. I was never real strong in math.
yeah,
So I gave up that, that dream pretty early on because I was like, people kept telling me, oh, you need to draw well. But, I had very poor drawing skills.
yeah.
So yeah, can you get a little into your hobby of chefing, or is this something that you want to eventually take professionally? Or
Oh no, I would never want to take it professionally, but I do love it. I mean, it's. I honestly, I think there's something very similar between cooking and composing. I mean, you're composing a dish basically, but also the creative.
Composing a dish, right?
Yeah, and the creative process is the same thing. Like there are two ways of composing. There's there are times when you when you know what you want. I want a love song. I want I want a action music, I want a whatever. You know what you want, so you know the ingredients that make that. So you start putting the ingredients together to make the thing that you want. And it's the same thing with food. I'm craving a tomato sauce, so I know what I need to do. I need to get some fresh tomatoes, chop them up, throw them in a pan with some olive oil and garlic and a little salt, and when it's done, throw a little fresh basil in. And so you know how to do that,
Right.
and then
Right.
there are other times where you don't know what you want. So you open the fridge door and you see what kind of goes together. You've got
Yeah.
you've got some
Improvise. You
yeah, you've got
improvise.
some
Yeah.
tomatoes, you've got a banjo, you've got, and
Yeah.
and you see kind of what leads to what. So I would say that's the creative process right there. And I think we probably all do it to some extent. Um, in every day of our lives. And people say to me, "Oh, I don't know how you could be a composer, how you would think of these things." And I bet you almost anybody could do it if they thought of it that way. What do you want to eat? What do you want to hear?
Yeah, I think music on a whole is intimidating to most people
Yeah,
to
like
want to
cooking.
try to try to make anything professional out of it. Like I know in LA, I was scared to do it full time, but
Mm,
once I was doing it full time, I didn't really enjoy it. That's kind
mm,
of a funny thing. I was kind of working with a lot of assholes,
yeah,
which LA is roaming with them.
sure.
I got most of my work off Craigslist, and I became very unhappy playing music out there. So
Yeah,
then I moved back east to be near family, and I've been here since.
yeah, yeah. And that's the other thing with the creative process, I guess. People can. I think when one is young, there's a lot of pressure to make a career out of it, to call yourself this thing, to identify as
Sure.
a this or that, and
Right. Right.
and that's fine. If somebody wants to do that, that's totally fine. But there are other options. One can do anything for the love of it. They can do it and not be famous. You can make a really good living in music and not be known and not be out there. And um, so it comes in a lot of different forms. And
Where
I
do you think you fall in terms of that, professional area, being seen, being unseen?
oh, I'm so completely unseen. Yeah.
Do you prefer that? Are you glad about that?
I think it depends on the project. There are a lot of projects I've been on that I'm really glad I'm unseen. There are a lot of films that I've scored that haven't really gone anywhere and shouldn't go anywhere. And
Right.
so I'm and you do a lot of stuff that's just work. You've got to, until you're in the position to say no to things, you have to say yes, and that means a large percentage is going to be pretty bad. And I still do that.
Right.
A lot of my work is not necessarily great stuff. But you do your best. You do what you can to make your parts as good as possible. And to try to learn something from it, and to bend it to your strengths if you can. And uh, but yeah, so I guess it's project dependent. There are other projects I've done that I wish had gone farther. And I think this opera that I'm working on is the best thing I've ever done, and I hope that gets heard and produced. And I don't really care if people think about me if they hear it, I but I want it to be heard. I want people to enjoy it, and
Sure.
I think
Now,
they will. Yeah.
what is your approach for marketing the opera or getting the opera, in front of the people who would need to produce it, or what's that process like?
I'm not sure. I'm starting to dip my toe into that and kind of get a glimpse into the opera world,
Right.
which is completely foreign to me. And I'm learning things that are I mean, it's just kind of wild. I mean, for instance, I wrote a company when I first started working on this opera 2 years ago. Somebody turned me on to a small opera company, development company out of Brooklyn and LA, but they do kind of major stuff. They're kind of a major pipeline for new operas. And I wrote them saying, this is my idea. I've barely started on it yet, but this is what I'm going for. And I got an automated response that said, the waiting list for us to read your email is 2 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And 2 years later, just last week, I got an email from them saying, oh, here's our submission process. If you want to officially submit, here it goes.
Yeah.
But I've been
Wow.
working. Yeah, it's crazy. And I've been working with a bunch of opera singers because I'm recording this and working with singers as I write it, so I can hear it as I go.
You get a better idea of what you're writing.
Yeah, especially because it's written in a dead language. Like I need to know how it sounds, and
yeah.
So the soprano I've been working with, she tells me that most opera companies don't. They set their schedule 3 years out, and they book singers 3 years out. So everything is done.
That's insane.
Years away, and so I don't know. I don't know anyone in that world. I'm not trying to be an opera composer. I just want this opera to be produced. So I don't really want to go through the years of meeting with 4 singers in a bare room and workshopping it. Like I've been doing that with the singers and orchestrating it myself, and so I want to get it to some companies in a complete form and hope they produce it. And I don't know how to do that. I'm definitely going to release the recording and
that's the tough thing. I mean, yeah, marketing can get you anywhere, but it's one of the hardest things to master.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I'm so grateful for the fact that I keep on getting work, because I don't do anything to market myself, and it's
is it word of mouth most of your business? Word of mouth?
It's word of mouth, or people have heard my work, so they reach out, and if you get a couple decent jobs a year, then you can work on a bunch of smaller stuff, so if you get
gives you room.
Exactly. So if you get a couple commercials a year, that really opens you up to be able to kind of work on more creative endeavors and things like that, So for me, over the last few years, it's been Kiko Man commercials. I've been getting a series of Kiko Man spots, which are just web ads, but they pay well enough that I can hire the singers for this opera,
Right.
Yeah.
So the opera is kind of your pet project?
Yeah, at the moment, that's my baby. Yeah. I mean, it's also, I mean, I don't know if it's a pet project or I mean, it's the most serious thing I've ever done, musically.
Right.
In terms of
ambition, right?
Yeah. And I think it's going to be really good. Like, I mean, and I don't even say that because it's me, because I don't think it is me. Like, I don't know. I don't know who wrote this opera. I think that I'm like they're inhabiting my body or something, because I feel like I've got nothing to do with it. I feel like it exists out there in the future, and I'm just kind of laying the bricks in the present. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because like when my composition, there have been songs that I listen back years later. I'm like, who wrote this? How in the hell did I write this?
Yeah. It's almost like a form of remote viewing. Do you know that term, remote viewing? Have you heard about these people who do right? It's almost like that.
Psychic phenomena, right?
Yeah. It's almost like I'm getting a sense of an opera that exists in the future. And I'm just, it's not even like I'm doing the work to make it exist. It's almost like it exists in the future, and therefore I do the work. It's like it's like a quantum paradox or something.
Exactly.
So yeah, or the tail wagging the dog. Maybe that's what it is. You know, maybe the only reason I exist is because this opera needs to exist, and it's not about me. It's, you know, so I'm just here to fulfill its own existence. I don't know. I have no answer.
Like you're prepping it, you're getting it all prepped, and then you're gonna step out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm letting everything tell me what it needs. You know, the story I came up with the story because I thought somebody should tell this woman's story, that her story should be known. I mean, she was a major figure. It's possible that there wouldn't have been an English language if it weren't for her. So that's kind of major. No Shakespeare, no Beatles, no rap, no Bob
Yeah,
Dylan if it weren't for her. So
no Bob Dylan. Yeah,
yeah, so the opera kind of came out of the need for someone to write about her and for someone to write a melodic opera that people want to listen to. And then that led to the libretto, and then the libretto tells me what it needs musically to get its narrative across. And then the music tells me what it needs in terms of orchestration and how to support the melodies. And so everything's just telling me what it needs. And my job is to just obey, you know? Just like a
yeah,
tomato sauce. You taste the tomatoes and you think, oh boy, these are really acidic tomatoes. They need a little something with sugar, you know. So you fry up some
yeah,
onion to release the
exactly.
sugars. It's you're responding to the thing and trying to serve it as best you can. And calling on your whatever technique you know and you have at your and skills you have at your disposal, and learning from others who know better than you, um and just trying to get it right. And then in terms of reward or accolades, I mean, you can't even really think about that, you know? Like,
That's not to, I think.
yeah, I mean, if it comes, that's great. But it will only come if the music is great. And the music won't be great if you're thinking about accolades and being famous, you know, one thing at a time.
Right. If you're thinking about the money that you're gonna make off it,
Oh yeah,
it's not
yeah, and
not gonna
that,
be a good scenario. Yeah.
yeah. And you know, there you go. I mean, like, if because everyone knows, if you want to make it rich in music, write an opera in Old English about a 10th century Mercian queen.
Yeah, that's the ticket.
Yeah, that's where the
That's
money
the
is. Yeah,
ticket.
the independent investors love that shit. So uh yeah, I know. So you know, you follow where you're needed, and you do what you can, and and hope at the end of the day that you've got more than you owe in bills and can.
Exactly. That's the name of the game.
Yeah, yeah. And if you do that, and if you treat people well, and if you keep on working and working hard, then I think you'll end up with a career. You know, if your ego gets the best of you, and if you make it about you and your thing and your sound and what you know, if it's you might get a few years out of that, but it won't last. And you know, art is it's an act of service, and it's an act of discovery more than anything else. You know, you're figuring out
Absolutely.
what shit wants from you, and yeah. So I mean, at least that's how I look at it. I don't know if that's a recipe for failure or success or what, but um I don't know.
So,
I think,
quick question for you, for our listeners.
yeah.
For the entry level composer, the entry level producer, the person who's really green in the music industry, what actionable steps would you suggest that they take to further get themselves closer to the industry?
Well, that's great. I would say learn as many skills as you can. Take the skill part seriously, because it's not just about personal expression. The expression doesn't mean anything if you don't have the skills to convey that to the listener. So
That's a
learn
great point.
learn
Yeah.
piano, do your scales, learn another instrument, do your scales, practice 20 minutes a day, learn production, learn what compression is, learn how reverbs work, learn as much as you can, listen to as much as you can. Don't worry about genres or types of music. It's all music. We're all just conveying different patterns in different ways. Genres that's for the layman. That's for the non-musician. They can think in those terms. But if you want to do it, you've got to have a much broader mind and be open to anything that anybody's doing musically. And again, learn your skills. Practice to a
Like you said before, don't say no.
Don't say no. That's right.
Take whatever offer. Like, because I know when I was in LA, I was turning down a lot of positions because I felt like, oh, I don't like this style of music, or oh, I don't want to play to a click track live. But when I think back, I'm like, man, I wish I had taken more of those opportunities, because maybe that would have led me, higher up into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, everything can be treated as an opportunity to expand your skill set, and it all can be frightening. But like once you start practicing it and breaking anything down into kind of little bits, and you learn this little bit, you get that right, you move on to the next little bit. Anything can be kind of worked out and achieved, and if you're willing to kind of adjust and see these things as not limitations but opportunities, to expand your own knowledge, your own ability set. So yeah, I think that's a key thing: putting your ego aside, learning the skills, taking them seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously, but take the work seriously and the art seriously. And treat other people well. Work hard and treat other people well, and go the distance. Go the extra distance. Do shit for free. If somebody, give them the extra hour. Like polish it up and make it that much better, even though you're already off the clock. Because
put in the work now. Put in the work now.
Yeah, and people remember that. They remember, and then they want to treat you well, and they want to pay you more. And so if you deliver, and if you put your ego aside and treat people well, and that'll at least do something. I mean, you've got to be in the right environment too. If you live in the middle of nowhere, it's going to be hard. And you want to be a composer. You've got to be connected to the industry to some degree, physically or somehow.
You've probably got to be either in New York or LA.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you want to get into film or TV, you kind of have to start there, unless you want to be a local cameraman for Chicago News, then don't go to LA. But
right.
But yeah, if you want film or TV, music is a bit broader, because it all depends what you want.
And then there's country's getting really popular now, so Nashville is a big place for that.
Totally. And if you want to be a live musician, the music industry is on its head, and how to make money in music is not what it used to be. And you might make more money busking than you will trying to book medium-sized gigs or venues, because
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's crazy, but there's something ridiculous and kind of beautiful about it too. So if you're a musician, like a live playing musician, use that wherever you are. Go on the street, find a local bar, find a local coffee shop. If you're a piano player, find a place where you can tinkle the keys while people are eating dinner. Whatever it is. Yeah, you don't have to be famous. You don't have to be the number one online presence. You have to make a living. And so however you can do that. And again, there's a lot of steps between zero and the most famous person on earth. And there are a lot of people.
And like you were saying before, check your ego.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're being authentic and treating people right at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah, totally. So that's really the only advice I can give. And practice, practice, practice.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. My 2 cents.
Did you have any further questions, Brian?
No, I mean, that was definitely a good answer to, what does the entry level music person do to break in? I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of ways into the industry. You just need to learn as much as you can, and that's going to help you get your foot in the door somewhere.
Yeah. And you never know what anything's going to lead to. I never thought I would be a producer. I thought I was just a keyboardist and singer, and that was my thing.
Right,
And
right.
then we were only doing cover songs, and I wanted to do originals, and the band was like, well, we don't write songs. If you want to do originals, write something. So that's how I started writing songs. So you just
Oh,
have
wow.
to be kind of open to doing what's needed. I didn't want to learn production, but then I needed to learn production, and now I'm really happy I did.
Right.
So
Because,
yeah,
some people never learn that. They're just like, oh, I'm a singer and that's all I do.
yeah, that's a recipe for, I mean, you got to wear a lot of hats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And embrace that, because anything will get tired after a while. So it's really nice to have a little break from my opera when I get a stupid little commercial or pop song to work on, because I'm like, oh, thank God. It's a little break from what I've been doing for the last month. Like, and I'll put some money in
Yeah.
my pocket,
Right. Right.
So yeah, no, it's all welcome.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
We
I'm gonna
definitely
watch the debate.
the political debate.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it actually.
When is that?
It's tonight. It's right now,
Oh,
starting
okay. Wow.
starting at 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay. It's a perfect time to end it.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you coming on today, man.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was great talking to you guys, and I hope this does something for somebody somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, our podcast, we're trying to help out the small fish, trying to
Good.
help out the little guy, break into the tech industry, break into the game industry,
Yeah.
break into the music industry. We're trying to be that branch for people to grab onto.
Good for you. It's great. We need it.
Absolutely, man. We definitely appreciate you for coming on, man. We'll have to have you back sometime.
All right. Well, you guys take care. Have a great night.
Likewise. Great talking to you.
And you. Good night.